You are about to experience an awesome Adobe Photoshop tutorial here for beginners created for you in 2019. I'm Jerry Banfield and I've partnered with Chris Parker, who is an instructor in Adobe Photoshop, and we're going to walk you through the basics of Adobe Photoshop for beginners. If you're new to Photoshop, you might wonder, well, why would I want to learn this? Adobe Photoshop is a very valuable skill to learn as a part of a career in graphic design or to be a well-rounded entrepreneur online. There's tens of thousands of people on this one freelancing platform I'm looking at alone who've earned $10,000+ off of having Adobe Photoshop as part of the skills listed on their profile. What we're about to show you is part of a video course named 27 Photoshop Projects for Busy Entrepreneurs. We're giving you the first hour of the course for free here to help you and be useful for you. And if you want to buy the full course, we trust you'll use that link in the description to go get the course. And if you'd like to get all of Chris's courses, Chris has the Chris Parker Forever Master Bundle. If you love Chris as an instructor, he's got 24 courses in his bundle, and there's a link to that in the description. You can get them for $48. On Euthena, I'm Jerry Banfield, the founder of Euthena. If you want more free tutorials like this, I trust you'll hit that subscribe button and join us. Ready or not, now we are starting with Chris. Welcome to Adobe Photoshop for Beginners, and thank you for starting this video.
Hello and welcome to Photoshop 101. So in this tutorial, we're just going to go over some of the basics for Photoshop. If you're brand new to Photoshop, you've never used it before, then this is going to be a general overview on how to open new documents, create new documents, and we're going to take a quick look at the interface so you can get an idea of where everything is located within Photoshop. So when you first open up Photoshop for the first time, you're going to get a screen like this, but you're not going to have any images because you haven't worked on any files yet. So when you start opening up files and you quit Photoshop and you come back, it's going to show you a list of files that you've recently worked on, which is an easy way to go back to an existing project that you're working on so you can continue working on it. You can also come over here and click on this button to open up a specific file, or you can create a new document from here. So within this new dialog window here, you can create a name for your document, and then you're going to type in the width and the height of that document, either in pixels, inches, or another measurement of your choice. You also need to type in the resolution. 300 is going to be for print if you're sending a file out to be printed, or if it's going to be a file for online use, you want to set it to a resolution of 72. Then to get started, we're just going to click OK, and that's going to create the new document for you. And this part of the interface holds our document. We have a tab up here with the name that we gave it. I didn't give it a name, I just left it untitled. And we can also remove that tab when working with multiple documents. We can also bring this back, and you're going to see that little blue outline there, and that's going to allow you to attach that tab back to the interface so it's locked in. Up here at the top, we have a section that will change based on the tool that you select, and it basically gives you different options based on the tool that you've selected. So these are tool options. Over here to the left, we have a menu here of different tools that we can access through this toolbar, or you can come up to the menus up here to select them. And my preferred method for actually selecting tools is through keyboard shortcuts. So as we go throughout this course, I'm going to name that particular keyboard shortcut for that tool that we need to access so you can get into the habit of using them, because it is much faster to grab your tools and options via keyboard shortcuts versus coming over here or to the menu. So for example, if we wanted to create a new document, we can come up to File, and we have New right here, and then right next to it we can see the keyboard shortcut, which is Command or Control, and that's all going to depend on if you are on a Mac or a PC. If you are on a Mac, you're going to select your Command key. If you're on a PC, you're going to select your Control key, plus you're going to press the letter N. So throughout the course, I will provide both commands for PC and Mac, and I will say it like this: Command or Control and the letter N. And then you're going to see a little animation down here that's going to list that keyboard shortcut for Mac and PC users. So it's just a visual reminder to let you know that a keyboard shortcut was being used in case you didn't hear what I was saying, because sometimes I go a little bit too fast and I talk really fast. And that's because we're working on more advanced type projects. And at that point, we've probably used that keyboard shortcut 100 times. So I will tend to say it a little bit faster at that point. So that's why I like to have that little animation down here just to help you so you can see exactly which keyboard shortcuts that I use. So just keep that in mind. All right, so we went over the tool options. We have our tools over here. Now, the other thing I want to mention about our tools is there's additional tools within the tools. So what do I mean by that? Well, if we take a look at the tools here, we can see a little arrow in the bottom right of the icons. So this icon right here, this is our brush tool. And depending on your preference settings, you may have your tip tools activated. So as you can see right there, we have a little menu. It says brush tool and then a B by it. That's the keyboard shortcut. So if you want to grab your brushes, press the letter B, and that's the keyboard shortcut. But within that tool, if we click on this little arrow or just anywhere and hold down your left mouse key, you're going to see a pop-out window with additional tools inside of it. So any tool that has that arrow has additional tools within it. And these are just additional tools to help you achieve what you want to achieve based on that tool, because all the tools give you different options for achieving what you're trying to achieve. Some tools will work better than others. So it just takes time to know which tools you're going to need for that specific project. So practice, practice, practice is going to help you understand what the different tools do, how to use them, and in time you'll learn and know which tool will be best for that particular job. It's not going to happen overnight. I'm not going to sit here and say in 4 hours or 8 hours or even in a year or 4 years or whatever the case may be. It takes time to learn all these different tools. Photoshop is a complex program with tons of tools, and all those tools will work differently on different images and different types of projects. So it just takes time to go through them all and learn exactly what they do. Now, the other thing about the toolbar, we do have an option down here. We have two colored boxes here. This is our foreground and our background. So we can set our colors that we want to paint with by clicking on that box, and then we can use our color picker to select the color that we want. Now, I do have some other panels here as well. Yours may not be set up in this area because I've customized my interface. So your extra panels, when you add them, may actually be over here on the left by default. So I have my actions panel here and my history panel, and I can add additional panels by coming up to Window and then selecting the tool or the feature that I want from here. So if I select paragraph, I'll get a new paragraph panel here, and then I can add that to this side of the panel, or I can click and drag it over here to the left, which is my preferred method of using them. So that's entirely up to you. So it's kind of hard to see, but there's a little graphic right here in dark gray. If we click on that, we can click and drag that out to create a floating panel, or just like we did with our tab document, I can bring it over here to the left, and once I see that blue line, I can release, and then it's going to lock those panels into that place. Now, each one of these panels are going to have different options based on that particular panel that you're working on. So we can see here we have a character panel. So this will be a panel that we will use to select our text tool options, but we can also select some of those options from up here in the tool options as well. And then our layers panel, which is your main panel that you're always going to be using because layers are an integral part of Photoshop. And we're going to learn more about Photoshop layers in the next lesson. But we do have other options for our layers down here. And again, we'll talk more about these in the next lesson. So that's the basic overview of Photoshop, how to open, create new documents, customize your interface, and where certain tools are located, and how to add additional panels. All right, so that's it. In the next lesson, we're going to go ahead and take a look at Photoshop layers. Hello, and welcome to the section on layers. In this lesson, you're going to learn what layers are, And then in upcoming lessons, we're going to go over the 12 types of layers and 3 types of layer customizations. Now, to me, layers are the most important tool in Photoshop. And the reason why is because they give you the flexibility and control to achieve your creative vision. So what exactly are layers? Well, layers allow you to stack different graphics or images, paint, or other types of editing adjustments via those layers, and they provide a method by allowing you to creatively adjust your artwork. So again, without layers, we wouldn't be able to achieve what we can with them. Now, the other thing to know is layers are independent of each other. And another way to look at layers is to think of them as individual canvases. So each canvas or layer receives pixels that you add to it. So if I create a new layer or canvas and I apply paint to it, it's not going to affect any other layer above or below it. So if I now turn this layer off, we can see that the paint is gone and wasn't applied to the layers below it. But if I create a new layer and wish to add paint to it, but I end up choosing the wrong layer, then the paint will not be added to it. Instead, it's actually added to the layer that was selected. So it's important to make sure you have the layer you want to work on selected. So right now I'm probably going a little fast, but remember, this is just an overview. And in this section and many more to come, we will be using layers a lot. So don't worry if this doesn't make a whole lot of sense yet. There's a lot to learn about layers, and we're going to take each part of the layers one step at a time. Now, this document that you're viewing right now that I'm working on has a list of all the different types of layers and how you can customize them. And this particular file is attached to this lesson. So if you want to play around with all the different types of layers as you're watching the lessons in this section, you can go ahead and download this file from this particular lecture. So go ahead and download that if you would like to play with it and follow along at the same time. So before we get into all those different types of layers and customizations, let's first take a look at some options that we have inside of our layers panel. Now, if you don't have your panel visible, go up to Window and select Layers. You can also dock your layers panel to either side. And personally, I like to have mine over here on the left, but it's entirely up to you on where you would like to place it. So let's take a look at some of the options here inside of our layers panel. And if we take a look right here, there's a little icon in the upper right here. If you click on that, it's going to show you some options you have available for your layers. Now, you can also go to any type of layer and right click on it to get another menu of options. And a lot of these are available over here as well, but I prefer just to right click and select my options from here. Now, there is one option in here that I like to set up for my individual layers, and that is this panel options down here. So go ahead and click on that. And from here, you can increase or decrease the size of the thumbnail for your layer. So right now I have the largest thumbnail available. If I set this to the smallest, you'll notice that the thumbnail has now gotten smaller. I'm going to go ahead and put that back to the largest because I prefer to have the largest size available. So go ahead and set that to whatever you like. And then for these different options inside of this menu, we are going to explore most of these different options in future tutorials as we work on different types of projects. So we're not going to go into great detail about a lot of these right now. We'll work on that at a later time. Now, up here at the top of our layers panel, we have an option to filter by the type of layer that we have in our document. So we have a bunch of different options. We can filter by a specific name. So if we know a name that we applied to a specific layer, we can search for it by typing in the name, and then all the layers with that name will then be filtered and nothing else will be shown. So we can also turn that off by clicking on this little icon here to get back to the original, or just delete out the name that you typed in there. And you can also filter by different types of layers as well through these options here. This option here is for blending modes, which is a type of customization that you can apply to your layers. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in this section. And there's an entire section all about blending modes that will be coming up as well to give you more information on how you can use these for your artwork. You can also adjust the opacity of your layers, and you can adjust the fill of your layers as well. And at first they may seem to be doing the same thing, but they are actually quite different. And we'll go into more detail about how they are different in an upcoming lesson. We can also lock individual layers as well. And we have a lot of different options for locking. So the one that I use the most is lock all, which pretty much prevents you from deleting that specific layer or even moving it within the document itself. And it's very handy because if you have a lot of layers and you don't want to accidentally move anything, then locking that layer is very helpful. And then down here at the bottom of the panel, we have some additional options for our individual layers. We can link them, we can add special effects, we can add a layer mask, which is another type of layer. We can add some additional adjustments to our levels here to customize them. We can also group individual layers together, and we can also create a new layer from this icon, or if we want, we can actually delete the layers with this option here. Okay, before we move on, I just want to show you how you can interact with your layers themselves, because you can adjust them, rearrange them, turn them on and off. And if you take a look right here, you can see what looks like a little eyeball icon. And if you click on it, it actually hides that particular layer. And then any layers that are visible underneath will show up, and we can also turn those on and off as well. We can also rearrange the order in which the layers are stacked within the layers panel by clicking and dragging that layer to a new position. So once I move this up to the top, it's going to become visible because it's at the top and it's turned on. We can also rename our layers by double clicking on the name and giving it a new name. Okay, so that's it for the basics of layers and the layers panel. In the next lesson, we're going to take a look at the 12 types of layers and how we can use each type of layer. Okay, so in this lesson, we're going to take a look at the 12 types of layers available in Photoshop, and there's a lot of them. So we don't want to get overwhelmed at this point. I just want to quickly show you each of the different types of layers so you are aware of the different types of layers and the power of all these different layers to help you fulfill your creative vision. So right now we're just going to briefly go over all of the different layers, and then in upcoming tutorials and projects we will go into more detail about these individual types of layers and how you can use them to fulfill your creative vision. So for now we're just going to go over the basics. And the other thing I want to mention real quick is you're going to use some of these layer types a lot more than others. It's all going to depend on the type of work that you do and your workflow. But some of these layer types you're going to use on every single project. And the background layer is one of those. So let's go ahead and go over that type of layer first. So your background layer is always located at the bottom of all other layers. It also comes locked automatically, and there are limitations on what you can do with this particular layer. You can't rearrange it, you can't delete it, and you can't move any contents within it while it is locked. And I'll show you how to unlock it in just a second. Now the sole purpose of this type of layer is, well, it's the background for the rest of your document. When you open up an image file, it will be located on a background layer, And the thing is, you don't want to work directly on this background layer to edit that particular image. And I'm going to explain more about why in an upcoming tutorial. Now, when you create a new document, you can specify the color of that background layer. And once you create that new document, it will automatically be locked with the color that you chose. So that's your default layer when opening or creating new documents. Now, you can actually take a brush and paint color on it, but there's really not much else you can do with it. But let's say you want to convert this background layer to a regular layer that you can do more with. Well, to do that, just double click on the layer, give it a new name, and click OK, and then it will become unlocked. Then you can do whatever you want with this particular layer like any other layer. Now, the next type of layer I want to talk about is grouped layers, because this particular document has 3 grouped layers that you can see right now. So we have layers, 12 types of layers, and 3 types of layer customizations. And we know they're grouped layers because it has this folder icon next to each name, and then this little arrow to the left of the icon. So if you click on that little arrow, it will expand and show you all the layers inside of the grouped layer. So grouped layers are used to help you manage and organize your layers into groups. And then within the grouped layer, you can add any type of layer. So we have a regular type of layer here, which is a text layer, and then we have additional grouped layers. So you can put grouped layers and other grouped layers as many times as you want based on how you want to organize all those different layers. And believe me, when you're working on a project and you have hundreds of different types of layers, it's nice to organize them into groups to make it easier to locate specific layers, unless of course you go up and you type in the name and filter out that way. But this is another way to help you manage all the different layers you're working on. So the next most common type of layer is a pixel layer. And if you're a photographer or an artist, a painter, then you're going to be using a pixel layer a lot. So a pixel layer is basically, well, it allows you to add pixels to that layer. So even this icon itself is a pixel layer because it contains pixels. So with your pixel layer, you can rearrange the pixels based on your creative vision. And we're going to learn a lot about how we can adjust these different pixels for our creative vision in upcoming lessons. Now, the opposite of a pixel layer would be considered a vector layer. So in the beginning of the course, we went over the difference between pixels and vectors. And as you know, vectors are not necessarily pixels, but a graphic file that you can resize without loss of quality, whereas a pixel graphic, you're going to lose quality as you resize it larger. So a vector layer is one in which you create a shape. So if I create a rectangle, we now have a vector layer, and we can see in the bottom right of that thumbnail, we have a little icon. So that's what I have here as well. So this icon represents vector layers. So anytime you see this particular icon, you'll know that it's a vector layer. And there's other ways to create vector layers as well. For example, with your pen tool, or maybe you add a document created in another program like Adobe Illustrator, you can also have that particular document added as a vector layer as well. Okay, next we have type layers. So the type layer is pretty self-explanatory. When you add text, you end up with a type layer. And if we take a look at this layer here, we can see a letter T next to it. So anytime you see this letter T, you will know that that's a type layer. Now this particular layer here used to be a type layer, and you can convert type layers to pixel layers like this one here simply by right-clicking on a layer and selecting rasterize type, and then it will become a graphic or a pixel layer instead of a type layer. Now the other thing is I'm using a specific font for all these different groups of names and the title, and when you opened up this document, it probably said that specific fonts were missing. And that's because you don't have these specific fonts installed on your system, and you can either install the ones that it says are missing because it should have shown you the name of the fonts used, or if you just click out of that little screen that popped up, it will automatically default to a different font family. Okay, so the next type of layer is a fill layer, and a fill layer allows you to create a layer with a solid color, a gradient of color, or a pattern. So in a way, it's similar to a pixel layer in that it's adding pixels of color to that particular layer, but you do have the option of the type of pixels based on these three options right here. Now this next type of layer is one of my favorite types of layers, and it's known as an adjustment layer. So adjustment layers allow you to work non-destructively, so you don't have to work on that background layer of your original image. So let's take a quick look at it. So here we have an image on a pixel layer, and then if I want to edit that particular image in a certain way and I apply an adjustment to it, it's being applied directly to that specific layer. Now if I close out this file and come back tomorrow, next week, next month, and I want to change it back to the original image because maybe I converted it to black and white and now I want that color back, it's too late because I worked destructively. So instead we want to use adjustment layers, and if we apply a black and white layer adjustment above that particular image, it becomes a separate layer, so that edit is separate from the pixel layer below it. And then if I save this file as a PSD file and come back tomorrow or next week, I can go back to the original color image because I can either turn off this layer, this adjustment layer, or I can delete it. So that's working non-destructively, and we're going to do a lot more of this type of editing throughout the rest of this course. Now real quick, there are a ton of different types of layer adjustments that you can apply to your artwork. We're not going to go over all of them now. We will cover all of them in future lessons. But for now, I just want you to be aware that layer adjustments give you more creative control over your editing versus working on the pixel layer directly itself. Now another important type of layer is a smart object layer. So a smart object layer could either be an image or a graphic, and it contains additional information inside of the layer itself that allows you to edit the contents of that specific layer. So right here, I have a layer that's considered a smart object, and we have that little icon right here that shows you that this is indeed a smart object. So anytime you see this, you'll know it's a smart object. So if you have a smart object and you want to edit the additional content or information inside of that smart object, double click on this icon down here, and then a new tab or a new window will open up showing you the content inside of that smart object. So now we can see all the different content or the different layers for this particular document. So if I turn this layer off, we can see the original color of the image. Then if I save it with Command or Control and the letter S and close it out, Once we go back to our other document with that smart object, you're going to notice that the image has been updated because we made a change within the contents of the smart object. So smart objects are a little bit more confusing than regular layers, but just remember, a smart object contains additional information, additional layers that you can edit. And there's a lot of benefits to using smart objects in this way. And as we work on additional projects in the future, we will be using smart objects, and it will become much clearer on how to use them and why we want to use smart objects. But for now, let's go ahead and move on to the next type of layer, which is also a type of smart object. So this is known as a linked smart object. So our original smart object and linked smart objects work in the same way. There's content inside of this linked smart object that we can edit by double clicking on the icon. Now, the difference is the first type of smart object, the contents and the information and the layers are embedded in the document that you're working on. A linked smart object is a type of smart object that is not embedded in this document, but instead is linked to the original file on your hard drive. So if you try and edit this particular type of smart object and you don't have the original file on your hard drive, then you will not be able to edit the content. Now, because I do have the original linked on my hard drive, we can see it, but if you double click on it, you're not going to be able to edit that content. Now, our third type of smart object is one that is linked to the cloud or your Creative Cloud account. So again, you can edit the smart object if you have that particular file available in your Creative Cloud account. So here I have an image from Adobe stock that I have linked to my Creative Cloud account, and we can see the little icon down here in the bottom right of the thumbnail, and that shows me that this is a Creative Cloud smart object. So right now, this particular layer has a watermark over the image, and I don't have rights to this particular image. I can't use it for commercial purposes. So I have to license this particular file, and when I do, that watermark will be removed and it will be replaced with the original high-res file that I licensed for. So I can use Adobe stock images in my projects, and then once my clients give me approval for that particular project, I can then purchase the license for them, and then because the layer is linked to my Creative Cloud account or my Adobe stock account, it will automatically update once I license it. And we're going to talk more about Adobe stock images in a future lesson. For now, let's go ahead and take a look at another type of layer, and that is the frame layer. So anytime you use the frame tool and you add a frame, which is simply a placeholder for an image or graphics or even type, you will notice a little icon in the bottom right here that looks like this icon here, and that lets you know that that's a frame layer. So we're going to talk more about the frame layer in an upcoming section. Now, another one of my favorite type of layers is the layer mask. So a layer mask can be added from down here, and once you add it to your image or to your adjustment layer or other types of layers, you can precisely control how a specific edit is being applied to that pixel layer. So it gives you the precision and control for your creative vision. So instead of adding an adjustment or an edit to the entire document or the entire image, you can specify exactly where you want to place that specific edit. Maybe you just want to target the sky of a particular image, or maybe the face of a particular portrait, you can do so with the layer masks. And we're going to be using that particular type of layer a lot in this course. So we're going to leave it at that for now, and we'll go into more detail about this layer type and a lot of the other layer types as well in upcoming lessons and projects. Okay, now let's go ahead and take a look at the 3 different ways we can customize our layers. The first one is layer styles, and you can apply these types of styles or effects to both your type layers, vector layers, and your pixel layers. So you can add a stroke to an image and a drop shadow if you want, or you can apply color overlays to your graphic files or even your type layers. And there's a bunch more types of effects that you can apply through this layer style type. So we're going to cover all the different types of layer styles in an upcoming section. Next, we have blending modes, which are very cool and a fun type of customization that you can apply to your layers. So here we have a black and white image as well as an orange graphic. And when I apply a blending mode from this drop-down menu, it will blend that layer with the layer below it. So there's a ton of different blending modes to choose from. And we're going to go over all of these different types of blending modes and how you can use them in the blending mode section. So real quick, if I want to blend this orange layer with the image below it, if I choose overlay, we can now see the layers are blending together. Okay, we can also use our opacity and flow options to customize the layers that we're working on. So right now I have a pixel layer right here of our landscape image, and even though it's turned on, we can't see it, and that's because the opacity is set to 0%. As I increase the opacity, the image becomes visible, and more so the higher we go, and then once we get to 100%, the entire image is visible. So that's one way of using opacity. There's other ways to use it as well, and we're going to be using it with our adjustment layers to tone down specific types of the edits, and we're going to learn how to do that in future projects. Now, I mentioned in a previous lesson that fill and opacity seem to work very similar, but they are indeed different. So let me show you how they are different. Now, if we take a layer, any layer, and we lower the fill down to 0%, you get the same effect as opacity. The image disappears. But here's how it's different. Let's go ahead and turn off this image layer and turn on this type layer here. And as you can see, there are some effects already applied to this type layer. So when we adjust the opacity of this text layer, we can see that the effects applied to the type and the text itself are becoming much more transparent, as we would expect with opacity. Now let's try it with fill. Now this time, the transparency of only the text itself started to become transparent and not the effects applied to that particular text. So that's the difference between opacity and fill. Okay, so those are the 3 main ways to customize our layers and the 12 different types of layers in Photoshop. Now that you have a general overview of all the different layers, it's time to move on and learn some more about how we can interact and use layers. And in the next lesson, I'm going to share with you how you can stack, copy, and delete layers. And there will also be an exercise file that you can use to practice what you learn. So if you're ready for that, let's do it.
Hello and welcome back. In this lesson, we're going to go over layer styles, which are another element to layers that will allow you to customize the layers and the elements and the graphics or the text within that layer
to style it and do different things to it. So for example, I have some text here. We can add a drop shadow to it. We can add a bevel and emboss. We can add a stroke, inner shadow, inner glow, satin, gradient overlay, pattern overlay, and an outer glow. So there's a lot of different styles that you can apply to the text and shapes and other things like that. So if I create a shape here, and if I want to add a drop shadow to it, all I have to do is double click on the shape layer, and then I will get the layer style dialog panel, and then I can choose from these style options over here on the left side to customize that shape or the text or whatever it is I want to add the style to. Then within the drop shadow, we have other options. We can change the opacity of that drop shadow, how far away it is from the object, the spread, in other words, how much it spreads out so it makes it smoother along the edges, and then the size of that drop shadow as well to blur it out or smooth it out even further. And there's other options as well. So we're not going to go through and explain every single one of these layer styles. Instead, what I would like you to do is grab this layer style PSD file that is attached to this lesson and play around with the different layer styles. So you can turn on or turn off these layer styles just like you can the layers in general by turning on or turning off this eye icon next to each one of the layer styles. You can also go back into that layer panel either by double clicking on the layer or the effects menu right here. And if I double click on that, it brings back that layer style panel so that you can customize it. So go ahead, download this file, play around with the layer styles, and that's the best way to learn how to use the layer styles to get the effects that you want to use. All right, so that's it for layer styles. In the next lesson, we're going to take a look at the type tool. All right, so for this lesson, we are going to take a look at our text tool, and we're going to go over some of the basics. So go ahead and create a new document from here, or use your keyboard shortcut, Command or Control and the letter N. Go ahead and give your document a name, and then just size it to whatever you want. I'm going to use 1600 by 900 with a resolution of 300 and a white background. All right, so to access your text tool, you can come over here to your tool panel and select it from here, or you can use your keyboard shortcut, which is the letter T. So up here, we can make our selections for our font. We can choose the type of font, the style of the font, whether it's regular, bold, or even italic, and that's going to all depend on the particular font that you have installed. So this font here has a lot more style options available versus the last one I selected. We can also select the font size from here, or we can type in a number in this box if we want a larger or a specific size font. This is for anti-aliasing, so I typically just keep it at crisp, but you do have other options depending on the project that you're working on. If you're working in paragraphs, or if you have a lot of text and you want to align left, center, or right, you can do so with these three options, but it's mostly for paragraphs. We can also change our color of our font by clicking on this little color box here. You're going to get your color picker dialog box, select your color, click OK, and then it's going to update that color in this box so you know what color you're working with. This option here is grayed out, and that's because we don't have any text selected, but when you do, you'll have an option to warp your text. We also have an icon here that will allow you to customize your text even further. You can adjust your characters as well as make other options for paragraphs. So if I click on this, I'm going to get two little panels here, and your panels may actually show up over here on the right side if you've never used them before. I've used these before, and I just like to have these two particular windows floating over my document so I have easy access to them as I'm working. So you can see here in the character panel, we do have some of the same tool options as we do up here, but there are other options as well to allow us to customize our text. And then the same with the paragraph option here. We have these three alignment options up here, but we also have a justify option here that's not available up here, as well as options to indent our paragraphs to style it even more. So these are all options to help you customize your text based on the project that you're working on. You can also access these panels from your window menu up here. We have character here, paragraph here. And you can always close these panels by pressing on this little X right here. So let's go ahead and add some text. Grab your text tool with the letter T and then just click on your document, and then you're going to get this blinking line here, and that lets you know you can begin adding text. So right now my text is fairly large because I used 150 points in my last project. So I can just double click on my text to select all of it, or I can go up to select and select all, and that's going to select all the text. We also have a keyboard shortcut here for that as well. So once you have all your text selected, you can come up here and change the font size to whatever you want. And like I mentioned before, you can type in a number as well. Now to get out of this text box, we have to come over here and click on our text layer or any other layer. We can then move that text in our document by grabbing our move tool from right over here in our tool panel, or by clicking the letter V for our keyboard shortcut. So I'm just going to move it to here so we can take a better look at this text and see some of the other options that we have. So I'm going to grab my text tool again with the letter T. I'm going to select all with Command or Control and the letter A, and that's only selecting the document. So we have these dancing ants around the document. I wanted to select the text. Well, so in order to do that, you first need to activate the text box by clicking on the inside of it, and then you can use Command or Control and A to select all, or just double click to select all. All right, so if we come up here to our character panel and our paragraph panel, we can make adjustments to this text. We can add an underline to it if we want. We can put a strike through. We can make it bold. So play around with these different options to see what you can do with it, as well as some of these other options as well. We have options to increase or decrease the spacing between the text, and that's known as tracking. So if you want to do something like that, you can, and that will allow you to customize your text even more. There's other options here as well, so go ahead and play around with those. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at how to add paragraphs to our document. So I'm going to grab some dummy text here. And to add a paragraph, instead of clicking and releasing, we're going to click and hold our left mouse button and drag out, and then you get this little box with these dashed lines. So this is our paragraph box. So right now I have my text aligned to the right, and that's why I have my cursor over here to the right versus the left. So I'm going to click on left align, moves over. I'm going to go ahead and adjust my text size to 12 points, and then I'm going to paste the text that I copied from a different document by going up to Edit and selecting Paste. Here's the keyboard shortcut, which is Command or Control and the letter V. And it applies that text based on the last options selected and not the text that I grabbed from my web browser. Now, if I had selected this text from a different document that had text styled differently, different color, different font size, etc., then it will apply those styles to the text. So I need to select all, Command or Control and A to select all, and then I can adjust the font to exactly what I need for this particular paragraph. So I'm just going to make some adjustments to it and change the color as well. Now we do have a little icon right here at the bottom right that gives us some information about this particular paragraph. We can see that it's different than the other boxes here. The other ones have nothing inside. This one has like a little cross or a little plus sign, and that lets us know there's more information inside of this text box. So if I click right here on this box and drag it down, we're going to have additional text visible now versus before because it's being cut off at the bottom of this dashed line right here. And we can see that icon is still there, and that's just letting us know there's still more text there. So you have to
increase your box in order to make all of it visible, or change the font size. So if I go back and select all and choose a 6-point font, then that little icon disappears and lets us know there is no more text. Everything is now visible. We can also come in here, click and drag to select a line of text so we can style that text differently from all the other text. All right, so that's it for Text 101. That gives you the basics of how to add text, how to style it, and how to add paragraphs. So go ahead, play around with the text tool, add some text, create some paragraphs, color it, resize it, and that's the best way to learn how to use this particular tool, and then you can start creating what you need for the projects that you're working on. In the next lesson, we're going to go over our selection tools. We're going to go over the basics, and I'm going to share with you these different selection tools that are going to be an integral part of your Photoshop journey. You're going to need to learn how to use these tools to retouch your images and much more. So we're going to go over the basics of the selection tools in the next lesson. All right, so in this lesson, we're just going to go over some of the basics when it comes to our selection tools. The selection tools are an integral part of Photoshop and are going to be an important skill set that you need to learn in order to create the documents that you want to create in Photoshop, especially when it comes to working with images. So within Photoshop, we have a total of 9 different selection tools, and they all do something very basic, which is allowing you to select something within your document. So up here at the top, we have our first set of selection tools. Within it, we have a total of 4 in this drop-down menu here. So these are known as our marquee tools, and they will allow you to either create a rectangle selection or an elliptical selection. You can access these tools with the letter M. And then just below that, we have our lasso selection tools, and we can access different tools within this menu as well. And let's quickly go over how to use each one of these. So the first one allows you to draw out your selection freehand to allow you to quickly select the subject that you're trying to select. Our next selection tool is the polygonal lasso tool. Now with this tool, you're going to click and drag out a line that will allow you to create a polygonal shape if you want, or any type of shape you want, to make your selection that way. The other lasso tool is our magnetic lasso tool. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in to show you how this works. Now we could select our couple or our subject, whatever it may be, with our lasso tool, and we can try and draw around our subject to select, but you can see I'm not doing a very good job, and I'm selecting inside and outside of the couple, so it's not going to be a very good selection. Our magnetic lasso tool makes it a little bit easier. So what I can do is I can click on the outside that I want to start my selection from, and then when I start to trace, I'm not holding down my mouse button right now, I'm just tracing out the outline of the jacket. We can see the selection is snapping to that coat, and it's adding anchor points as I go along. So it's magnetic. It's snapping to the area that I want to select, and it's doing that because the contrast level between the jacket and our sky is very different. It's brighter in our sky and darker here, of course. So this tool knows that there's a contrast level difference between the two sides, and it's going to snap along that line of contrast difference. Now to complete our selection with this tool, we have to go all the way around the couple and back to the original anchor point to click and select it. So that's another selection tool that you're going to probably be using as you work on your documents, but it may not be the best tool for the job. That's why we have to learn about all the different selection tools, practice with them, and then you'll have a better idea of which tool will be better for the job. For example, what if we wanted to select our sky to replace our sky with clouds? Well, we could do it with the lasso tool. We could do it with the magnetic lasso tool, but we have another tool here called the wand tool that will do a better and faster job. So the first one is the quick selection tool. The other is a magic wand tool, and they both will allow you to make your selections a lot quicker versus the other options we've already gone over. So the letter W will select this tool, and this is how it works. You click and drag out, and it starts adding to your selection, and boom, just like that, I have the entire sky selected. If I delete that, you can see that I selected that part of the sky. So that's a lot quicker than using the magnetic lasso tool and trying to go around everything, right? But if we take a look at our magic wand tool, it's even quicker depending on the tool options that we select. One click and I have a large selection, but I don't have all of the sky selected like I did with the previous tool. And that's because of my tolerance level. I only have it set at 35. So it's going to select less of the sky unless I increase the tolerance. So if I change that to 150, I'm going to go ahead and deselect. And now when I click, it selects the entire sky. So it's looking at the different contrast levels based on the area that I clicked, and it's going to include the colors and the contrasts of that area from where I clicked from to make a larger selection. It increases the tolerance of the information that it's reading when you click. Now if I delete some of the couple as well, so it's actually selecting a lot more than I want. But because his suit and her dress or whatever else is very similar to the sky, it's going to select that as well. So a tolerance of 150 is too much, but there are other tools that we can use to make the selection process much easier or faster, or to even refine our selection. And that's by using this little option right here, which is known as the quick mask mode. So when I click on that, the selection turns to a red color. We can actually change that color of that mask by double clicking on it, and then we have a color option here, and you may want to change that red color, which is the default color, to something else when you're working on an image like this that was shot during sunset. So if I change this to blue, click OK, and then turn it on, we now have a blue color or a purple color versus the red color, and it's easier to see. So this is how this would work. So we make our quick selection with the quick selection tool or the magic wand tool, but it's selected too much and we don't want to select our subjects. Well, what we can do is we can grab our brush with the letter B, and let's go ahead and go up here and lower the size of our brush. And we can paint with white or black, and white is going to remove and black is going to add to our selection. So if we take a look right here, my foreground color is currently black. If I click on this little arrow right here, it changes the foreground to white. Or I can click on here and select black here, click here and select white. So white removes. Since I have white on my foreground, I can remove from that selection. If I go out too far, then I can switch to black and then paint with black, and that adds back to my selection. So if I turn off the quick mask mode, we can now see that my selection has been adjusted based on the adjustments I made in the mask. So if I want to remove the selection here, I'm going to paint with white. So I'm just going to do this real quick with a larger brush. And then once we get out, we see that part of the selection is now gone. Again, you're not going to learn how to master these selection tools overnight. It takes time and practice to learn how to use the selection tools and know which one is best for the particular project that you're on. These are just the selection tool basics, and that's all we're going to cover for right now.
In the next lesson, we're going to take a look at our retouching tools. All right, so in this lesson, we're just going to go over the basics of our retouching tools, and we have two main types of retouching tools. We have a clone stamp, and we have a healing brush tool that has some additional tools within it. So go ahead and grab an image or two, and we'll go ahead and take a look at how to use these particular tools. So the first one I want to go over is our stamp tool, which can be accessed with the letter S, or you can grab it via the toolbar right here, and we can see that's our clone stamp tool. Inside, we also have another tool called the pattern stamp tool. I never use this, and we don't use it for retouching anyways, so we're really not going to go over that particular tool. So go ahead, grab your clone stamp tool, and we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here. So our clone tool does basically what its name implies. It clones an area of our image to cover up another part of our image. So let's say we want to remove something from our image. In this case, I want to remove the couple. I can clone this area over the couple to remove them. And if I try and do that by clicking here or on the couple, I get a little message. Could not use the clone stamp because the area to clone has not been defined. So we have to tell Photoshop where we want to clone from. If I try and clone from the sky, then we're going to add the sky down here. So we have to find an area that is similar to the area that we want to get rid of. So we have some tall grass here and some grass down here, and it pretty much matches the area around the couple and behind them. So we have to define this area, tell Photoshop, okay, clone from here. So how do we do that? Well, you have to hold down your Alt or Option key, and that's going to change your brush to this target icon. Now when I click with my left mouse button, that lets Photoshop know that we're going to clone from this area. Now that I've clicked in that area, when I take my mouse over the couple, we can see the content within the brush is now from the area that we defined. So now I can paint over the couple to remove them, which I'm going to do. So I'm going to click and start painting over the couple, and they will start to disappear. Now, if you take a look over here to the right where we defined our cloned source from, you're going to see a little crosshair. So that's going to follow your brush based on where you clicked so that it continues cloning from areas outside of it to better match and blend in the area that you're trying to fix. Instead of adding this area down to here, it's going to add the area from over here because that's where our crosshair is right now. So that crosshair is going to follow you wherever you go on your document. The only problem is, I'm going to go back here and redo that. And if I continue holding down my mouse button, and let's say I have an area that's much larger than what I currently have, if I continue going to the left, it's going to add the couple back into our image because those pixels were originally there, and our crosshair right now to the right of the brush is where the couple used to be. So you have to be careful with the stamp tool when you have a large area to cover. So in that case, what we have to do is redefine a new target area because maybe we want to remove the tree. So I'm going to select this area now as my target, and then I can cover up the tree without adding the couple back to the image. So just keep that in mind when using the clone stamp tool. All right, I'm going to go back. And now we're going to take a look at our other retouching tools, which is located right here. So our first tool is called the Spot Healing Brush tool. And then inside we have a healing brush tool, patch tool, content aware move tool, and a red eye removal tool. So the red eye tool will remove red eye, which is caused by your on-camera flash, and you can easily remove that with this particular tool. We're not going to go over that though in this particular lesson. We're going to take a look at these four other options though, and I'm going to show you how to use them. So the Spot Healing Brush tool I love for removing blemishes.
So let's take a look at that. I have an image here of a teenager with some pimples. So once we have that tool selected, we can then click on a blemish and it disappears. I can paint over an area and that blemish disappears. How cool is that? So removing blemishes is as simple as clicking and dragging or painting over an area, and those blemishes magically disappear. I love it. I love this tool. Now, what happens though if it doesn't work? Because it's not going to work 100% of the time. Well, we have another tool in our toolbox in order to help us remove the blemishes. So with this particular tool, what Photoshop is doing is it's automatically selecting another area from our image to cover that blemish. The problem is if it selects an area that doesn't work and we don't get the results we want. In that case, we can come over to our toolbar and select the healing brush tool. And then just like our stamp tool, we can define an area from which to clone from or to heal from. So hold down your Alt or Option key, click in the area that you want to target, and then Photoshop will retouch or remove that blemish based on the information that you targeted. Again, if you're not getting the results you want, you may want to check your tool options up here and select a different option to see if you get better results. All right, let's go back to this particular image again because I want to show you two more tools, and that's the patch and content aware move tool. So the patch tool works very similar to the clone tool, except instead of brushing on, you're going to select the subject that you want to remove, and it's going to magically remove that subject for you without painting. So I have the tool selected, and we can see the icon is different from our stamp tool. And I'm just going to draw a line around our subject to make our selection. Once I get back to the area that I started, we get our selection. And now take a look at our icon. Still have that patch tool, but if you place it on the inside of your selection, we can see there's an arrow added to it. So with this tool, we're going to move our subjects to an area that we want to clone from, and they're going to magically disappear. So click on the inside of the selection and then move to the area that you want to clone from. You can see the selection inside the left one is now filled in, and when I let go, it magically removes the couple. Again, if you're not getting the results you want, you can make some different selections in order to refine your retouching with that particular tool. All right, let's go back and take a look at the content aware move tool. This one works very similar to the patch tool, but instead of selecting our subjects, we're going to select an area that we want to clone from, and then we're going to click and move that over the subject that you want to remove. Again, not getting the results that I want, so I have to make adjustments up here. All right, so that's the basics of our retouching tools. Just like our selection tools, we need to practice with all the different tools to get a feel for how they work. So go ahead and grab a couple of your own images and practice removing objects and retouching blemishes.
You are about to experience an awesome Adobe Photoshop tutorial here for beginners, created for you in 2019. I'm Jerry Banfield, and I've partnered with Chris Parker, who is an instructor in Adobe Photoshop, and we're going to walk you through the basics of Adobe Photoshop for beginners. If you're new to Photoshop, you might wonder, well, why would I want to learn this? Adobe Photoshop is a very valuable skill to learn as a part of a career in graphic design or to be a well-rounded entrepreneur online. There's tens of thousands of people on this one freelancing platform I'm looking at alone who've earned $10,000+ off of having Adobe Photoshop as part of the skills listed on their profile. What we're about to show you is part of a video course named 27 Photoshop Projects for Busy Entrepreneurs. We're giving you the first hour of the course for free here to help you and be useful for you. And if you want to buy the full course, we trust you'll use that link in the description to go get the course. And if you'd like to get all of Chris's courses, Chris has the Chris Parker Forever Master Bundle. If you love Chris as an instructor, he's got 24 courses in his bundle, and there's a link to that in the description. You can get them for $48. On Euthena, I'm Jerry Banfield, the founder of Euthena. If you want more free tutorials like this, I trust you'll hit that subscribe button and join us. Ready or not, now we are starting with Chris. Welcome to Adobe Photoshop for Beginners, and thank you for starting this video.